do that. All right, cool. So let's see, we should have some people start to pile in here. I just went live on LinkedIn, waiting for a few people there too. So we'll let the people start chiming in here. What's up, Graham? How are you, man? Got Graham Muir, Will Robbins, Preetam Bhat. I think I got that right. Alfie, I'm very bad at names.
Yeah, me too.
I'm very, very bad at names, but I'm doing my best here, you know, like a lot of us out there.
Oh, you got to improvise.
Look, I go for it. I've got no problem. Like, I see a name, I go for the name, right? Like, I'm going to try it. What's up, John Akbari? I know John. I'm like 98% sure that's John's actual, how you pronounce it. 98. He's been on a few webinars, so I'm going to trust that at this point I've got it. I've got his stuff. I've got his thing down at like a bare minimum. All right. Pritam gave me some grace there. So he said, Jake, you're close enough, so don't worry about it. So that's good for me. So look, man. I want to kind of jump into it. You know, for everyone joining now, Amanda, Ben, Gallum, Preetam, Will, etc. Just make sure, start dropping your questions in the Q&A. For everyone on LinkedIn, same thing. Start dropping your questions in the comments. If you want to see both Alfie and I, we'll drop a link over there. You can join the Zoom as well. Happy to have you. What's going on, Rin? John Kronmeyer, VP of Sales Canada. See, he's VP of Sales Canada. You're head of sales US. Do not get it twisted. Alfie is not the VP of Sales. He's the head of US sales. But he's the VP of Sales in my book. So look, man, so, you know, it's funny, when you and I first connected, and this is like a month ago, right? Our initial plan was to talk about scaling, you know, kind of scaling teams internationally, right? Because you've done both, right? You've scaled teams in the US, you've scaled teams in different parts of Europe. But I think, you know, obviously with what's happened, you know, I think we want to maybe open it up a little bit more. And I think what I'd love to get a sense for is maybe, you know, just tell us a little bit how your team is handling, you know, all like the current situation. So now you're the head of US sales, you're in the process of scaling a sales team here. And so tell me how you all have adjusted, you know, how have you all kind of started to make the pivot? Also, for everyone joining, make sure to drop just in the comments or in the chat, just your role and the company that you're at. So just like a quick, hey, this is the company I'm at, this is my role, and we can try to tailor it a little bit more one way or the other. If we've got more leaders, we've got more salespeople, you know, et cetera. So Alfie, how are you guys, you know, kind of handling the current situation?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a few different kind of key things there. I think when we first, it was like mid-March, when things kind of started getting a bit more serious, and that first kind of week or so, working over the weekend was very much kind of crisis management. What are we doing? What's the cash in the bank? And how do we react to this? And that was very much kind of like phase one. I think everyone kind of came out of that phase, you know, relatively quickly. The next kind of few weeks after that was really about execution. I think the key thing from like a sales perspective is all of the assumptions that you have. Once you've got to a point that you can grow and start scaling out your sales process and you have predictable lead generation and predictable closing percentages, etc., that's a good place to be in. When you kind of face a crisis situation like that, all of the assumptions that you had before going into your sales machine no longer really exist. And so you have to take the perspective, okay, we can't necessarily be output focused as much anymore. We have to focus more on the input metrics to be able to understand what are what's the new normal and the new assumptions that we have coming into this sales machine and this new normal. So a lot of April for us has been about kind of validating what is our ability to generate pipeline, what is our ability to close pipeline, and understand that kind of new numbers. And then once you have a bit more data to be able to make more strategical decisions, same thing, you know, there's different companies some may have cash in the bank. You know, for example, we raised our Series B in September, October, so we're fairly lucky in terms of timing. But at the same time, depending on what your cash runway is, you're going to want to think about, okay, we're going to pause investment. And if we have cash in the bank, do we want to invest in the sales machine that we're not sure yet that the assumptions we had previously are still valid? So for us, this kind of key period in total is about validating the new normal.
And what are you, I mean, how have you evolved then, right? So I think a lot of companies that had that exact same move, right? The first move was, oh shit, what do we do now? That whole plan that we had. Then I'm seeing, and then there's another group of companies that then I feel like went into like a shell and are still kind of there. They're like, we can't pitch right now. We can't sell right now. We can't pitch. It's insensitive. And then there's another group of companies that said, well, maybe we can. Maybe we can still sell. Maybe we can still, at least try to communicate with people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so where are you guys at in that kind of arc?
Yeah, so I think I guess we could address that in two parts. There's like the general mentality, and then there's also specific to Spendesk. I mean, we're lucky in the sense that we sell a finance tool that helps finance teams control costs and put a process of visibility around their team spend. So there's an element where we actually add value in there. We're not quite a Slack or a Zoom, but we're also not, a travel company which is suffering quite a lot, or in the events industry. So we're kind of in that medium. However, the general message, I think, is, should we sell, should we not sell? I think that all of the things that were true of sales before is still true now. So people have never wanted to be sold to. People want to find solutions to their problems, and people still do have problems that they need solutions to. So I think that is still the case now. And so there are people out there that do need their problems being solved. And so it's your job to be able to go and help them. I think that the key difference is not that, it's the context in which you do it in shines a light on all the good processes and then shines a light on all the bad processes. So what's happening, I think, is there's a lot of kind of poor messaging, poor cold call pitches, emails, just general ways that people manage the sales process, which are not great, which are kind of getting negative reactions from customers because it's seen as insensitive, but it's actually just shining light on what is already a bad process. So I think we view this as really an opportunity to kind of ramp everyone up to an excellent level of kind of sales excellence. So coming out of this kind of process, that level is going to be higher across the board, and we're using that to level up all of our reps.
Tell me about that. Like, what in particular? Right? Like, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you could go about that. You know what I mean? Like, what are some ways in particular? And remember, everyone, Megan, Natalie, Phil, if you guys have questions for us, again, we're going to try to basically talk about a few different topics. One is, if you're international, I'd love to hear how you're handling this. Like, how are my friends in the UK or other parts of the world? How are you handling this? I'd love to hear from you. Any questions that you have for us. But also just any questions that you have. Maybe if your team's struggling, feel free to drop them in here and we'll try to get to them. But when you think about investing in the team, right? So you're talking about, okay, we're going to invest in the team now, right? Or we're going to invest in sales skills or sales excellence. What does that mean for you guys? Like, what are the tactical skills that you feel like are most valuable right now?
So I think that we try never to be overly prescriptive in our approach to training the sales team. We always want to build frameworks and guidelines to allow each individual's own kind of flavor of sales kind of come out and flourish. But within those guidelines, I think that there's a lot of kind of blurriness that you may see just generally in the market. So to give you one concrete example, let's say empathy and humility. I recently posted a video on this on LinkedIn. There's so much going through LinkedIn sales advice on saying lead with empathy and be humble, but there's not much concrete advice as to what that actually is. And so what we aim to do is just make sure that it's very clear as to what that is and how to actually implement it. Going a step further, most people tend in this approach to be empathy by just having that first line of, hope you're well.
Hope it's well. I know times are tough.
I hope your family, your friends, your cat, dog, and everyone else that you've ever met is doing well. And then here's the pitch. And that's the only thing that changes. And I think it's a really, it's a poor way to do it. You can't necessarily go wrong with doing it. At least you're trying to make an effort, but it's not the right way. And so let's break it down. What actually is empathy? Well, it's to understand and share the feelings of the person that's in front of you. Now, from a cold email perspective or cold call, it's hard for you to share feelings necessarily because you don't know the impact. Is this person's personally affected financially, health-wise and so on? You don't know. But everyone to some degree.
But don't you think you should have an idea? You sell into a CFO in manufacturing. and they manufacture luggage. They're screwed. Nobody's buying luggage, right? You sell it to CFO of DoorDash. This guy's got a whole different set of problems. Like, I feel like one of the problems with empathy, Alfie, is that they're not even putting that level of effort. Like, hey, you might be going through this.
Exactly. And that's the thing, like the whole point of understanding and sharing those feelings is okay. Like when, instead of putting that one line, if you're sprinkling through your messaging by saying, okay, I clearly understand how your goals may have changed. And what's that's going to impact your day to day, that's kind of, someone's going to feel that they're being understood and you've taken the effort, and that's what real empathy is about. And it's the same thing with humility. I think that trying to train people and what that actually means in sales, well, both of these concepts are things that existed and you should have been doing before, but now there's just no margin for error. So we see that as a real opportunity for everyone to, level up their kind of skills there. Same thing with humility. What is it? Well, it's modesty. It's to lower yourself in terms of importance. It's to not assume that you know the answer. So instead of, people get caught on cold calls saying, well, why is your product better than the competitor? Or why should I buy this? Well, a humble person would say, listen, I have no idea why you should buy my product. Yeah, I'm reaching out to you because of this specific reason, but it's too early for me to tell whether this is a good fit or not. Let's continue that conversation, unpack that. And this is the sort of thing that I think where we're focusing on at Spendesk. It's just leveling everyone up to make sure that what they should have been doing before, they're mastering that now, so we come out the other side of this with a tip-top sales team.
Yeah, I think the key is research, and this is what I've been having a lot of conversations with our clients about too. And you and I have talked about this before. It's if you don't know, and I've posted about this a bunch last week, if you don't know what your buyers are going through, you don't have an idea, you can't help them. You're stuck with the pleasantries and shit. Like if you don't know what a CFO job is, if you don't know what a VP of finance job is, how can you help them?
Exactly.
Like that's the whole thing. My biggest hope is that we come out the other side of this with more educated sales teams around the buyer experience, around who my buyers are, what they care about, what they're going through, etc. And so it's good. We've got some questions starting to roll in here. So I'm going to start to tee some up for you.
Yeah, nice.
So I like this one, man, which is I'm a director of sales in a luxury hotel based in Dubai, with key source markets being UK, Europe, US, GCC. What do you think should be the key elements of the recovery plan from business development standpoint? So I think this is a lot of people, right, man? I think a lot of people right now are like, not a lot of people are traveling, right? They're like, oh, a luxury hotel Dubai, right? Like that they're going to buy right now. So Alfie, in situations like this, where someone sells into one of these types of markets, how would you guide this person? How would you, for this individual, how would you think about, kind of giving them advice on what to do today?
Yeah. So I think it obviously depends on how the situation kind of unravels. And there's a few different things that could happen. You could see like a V-shaped type recovery where, okay, we come out of, confinement and everything kind of goes back to normal when it's very, elastic in that sense. Or you could see two other variations, which is we've had a big hit and then there's going to be kind of a slow, maybe in the next quarter, and then there's a pickup in, more Q3, Q4. Or we could go down, stagnate, and then it kind of sucks for everyone for a long time. So we're hoping that it's going to be one or two. Now, in that scenario, if it's a V-shaped type of recovery and everything goes back to normal and there's a big boost up in demand, well, to be honest, it's just pushed everyone back a quarter, which is only bad if you haven't got the cash to really last in that period of time. Now, in terms of like building a recovery plan from like a sales perspective, if people are definitely not going to be buying in there, then it doesn't make sense to try and force sales down the pipe because it's just going to piss everyone off. So what you want to be doing is more backloading. So, okay, most of your revenue is not going to come from this month or the next month, but you can be preparing for that kind of heavy, back end load. To do that is to build up pipeline, and to build up pipeline is not to try and sell to people now, but it's to try and add value to those people, whether that's through content, connecting them with people that can be helpful for them. There's a ton of different ways that you can add value, and just creating those connections and conversations with the right people for the time is right. That's all that you really can do, and making sure that you've got the resources and everyone's upskilled, so when you have that pickup in demand, you can maximize your ability to absorb that into revenue.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it doesn't matter, even like Monica on here said, the V-shaped recovery is very unlikely. The thing is, it doesn't it doesn't matter. Meaning like a recovery will happen. And I think for Natalie, for your question, if I were you, I would have my list of my top people. I'd have all the lists of the companies, etc. And I would be gearing up for when it's time to come to Dubai. I'd be sending pictures. I'd be nurture. So as soon as they're ready to go on that big vacation or plan their next company outing, boom, I'm hitting up Natalie. And I feel like what you're talking about is, and that's for a lot of you out there, it's that if there is no call to action right now, like the other thing that I would be really focused on, again, is probably what people will do first is they'll come out in their own city. So maybe before a lot of your stuff was, what's up?
Hello.
All right, I'm on a webinar. All right, he's gonna go hang out now. All right, so I feel like the funny part is like, how soon do you think it will be till where we get like really annoyed at this again? Like right now, it's like it's totally fine, but that there will come that phrase when people are like, "Oh my God, his kid came in," they'll be like, we will lose our patience so fast. It's going to be silly. But anyway, back to my point. My point was, I think the first people that are going to come around are the people in Dubai. So if I were you, maybe for the first time ever, I would start to network within Dubai. So maybe before, and because maybe you're going to get people that want to do conferences or they want to do things like that locally. So maybe Natalie, your short-term strategy before a bigger rebound happens is you basically have these local people that you never had before because they might want to do something in their own area, So that would be my like hot take on it.
Yeah, and maybe to add onto that, this is where I think that the kind of mentality of a startup is something that many startups are kind of used to having to adjust and create strategy and pivot and keep changing, because that's just part and parcel of you don't necessarily know if you've got a product market fit or your business is going to do well in a certain environment. So you have to iterate quickly. So there's kind of a bit of habit there. But for larger companies that have more of a fixed business model, that have been in business for a while, that haven't been affected, don't necessarily have to think like that. So in this time, it's a great time. Yes, if you have a V-shaped, okay, we've missed a quarter. If we have a sort of a little stagnant period and then come back, it's going to be more backloading the revenue into the end of the Q3. And if there's stagnation, well, that third option, well, that's something that, okay, well, then we need to rethink business models. We need to pivot our actual revenue streams and more structurally change the way that our business makes money. And that's something that in the short term, you don't necessarily have to plan for just yet, because you're going to have a bit more time in advance to be able to plan for that. So that's the kind of way that we look at that at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's right. That you plan, you keep these contingency plans in place, you keep getting creative. And then when things are ready, you're ready. And I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Like you're getting ready, to then do it, and like her follow on is like nurturing without it. Doesn't it feel like selling, and hence not quite sensitive right now? I think that we've got a lot of, I got a lot of people here who have asking questions here. Let's see, I'm going to just kind of scrolling through, I've got Christopher here who said, not taking calls, getting in touch with people without being too intrusive or too pushy. You've got a lot of that, during this time being discussed right now, leading with empathy is difficult as the impact is much different across industries or geographies. So there's a lot of people I think that are in this bucket right now. This bucket, and even Natalie's follow-up question is around this. And I'll give my 2 cents on this, that, Jonathan Rosenfeld asked this question. My struggle is how to tactfully prospect. The point being discussed right now, leading with empathy is difficult. It's different across industries. And I think that you're actually making the exact point, which is that we've got to stop this one size fits all approach. That my biggest hope is when we go back from this, like you've always had prospects from 0 to 100. 100 is I'm ready to buy, 0 is I have no desire to buy at all.
Yes.
You've always had people there.
Yeah.
But instead you've segmented into like 2 buckets. Well, guess what? You should probably have segmented into 8 buckets. And so going forward, for all of you, think about, and for most people, I'm saying that there's 3 buckets, right? Bucket 1 is industries that are doing really, really well. So again, Natalie, being in hotels is a little bit different, right? Because people just physically, it's illegal, right? For people to congregate in certain areas. But if there are areas, that you can, there's certain markets that are doing really, really well. And maybe not if you're a hotelier, but if you're in a different market. So focus on that 10 or 15%. Then there's 10 or 15% where their industry is really tough. So you just have to nurture. It's all you've got. And then there's everybody in between. And for everybody in between, that's where if you can pivot your value prop, that's where you can make the most impact. But not enough people are doing it. Okay, go get mommy. We're getting furniture delivered.
Yeah, exactly. I think, look, it's really not an easy time. And I think that it's difficult, but there's never a bad or hard time to lead with empathy. It just, what is empathy defined by? Understanding and sharing the feelings of the person in front of you. So the first step is understand, acknowledge. And so how can you understand something? Show that you acknowledge what's happening. If you know that this kind of company is going through a tough time. And also the same thing with being humble in that sense. You don't always know the answer, and that's okay. Yeah. It's okay to fall on your sword and say, listen, I don't know how you're being impacted. I can only imagine given the industry, but half of the people I'm speaking to are looking to do X and the other half are just not at all interested. Which bucket do you fall into? Could you guide me on the best way to reach out to you? If I received that, even if I was being in the middle of getting laid off, I'd be like, okay, wow, this person's really trying. They understand that they've not tried to assume anything. They're asking for the help. I mean, it's hard to react negatively to something that's written with such real empathy and real humility behind it.
But I think, Alfie, though, if you don't have that specific thing that you think is a potential issue, I think it all falls apart. Because for me, and again, this is my opinion, and I think this is just a good conversation for people to hear. If it's still like, I don't know what you're going through, this is I'm sure it's tough, and you don't have that little bit of specificity, look, other CFOs in CPG manufacturing, I know, are thinking about margins more than ever now. If you don't have that little bit, I don't think it's empathy. I think it's just it's another version of, hey, I know things are uncertain and crazy right now, and I feel like it's that sentence, that 7 words that so many sales teams are struggling with. And it's not being overly assumptive. I'm not saying I know that this is what's happening, but I am comfortable saying, look, I know what's happening I have an idea of what's happening in your world.
Exactly. And a bit of research, a bit of planning, it goes a long way. I mean, it doesn't take too much to understand what's going on in the news with a particular company to Google it before. And you'd be surprised at how many people don't research a company's name that may be affected, for example, by layoffs or things like that before kind of reaching out.
Or call it out. Call out. Look, exactly. You might be experiencing layoffs. Look, I'm not ashamed of this. Look, part of our business is we do staff augmentation around sales operations and sales leadership. If your organization, has had to cut deep or had to make changes, you still need help and support. Let us know if that's happened, and maybe there's a way we can help. And it's being okay that I'm not assuming that, it's not being predatory. I think a lot of people right now are really struggling with that balance. And so I think the advice here you're hearing from both of us is, you got to be more specific. Sorry. And guess what? You should have been doing this the whole time. You should have always had your customers divided. And even as a salesperson, it's not just marketing's job. I think a lot of people think it's marketing does all the nurturing and we only do the hardcore selling. That's not how you run a proper, as a salesperson, how you run a territory. I've got people in each step. And so next up, to your point, if I'm in sales right now, I'm going to have the most ridiculous Q3 on the planet. I'm going to destroy if I'm in most industries, but I don't see, but I think part of this is that Alfie, as a leader, and I'd love to hear how you do with your team. I feel like a lot of sales leaders we've been so focused on short-term results. Now call to action, that we forgot how to teach people how to run a business and to run their own business.
Yeah.
So, all right. This is an interesting one. What do you think the best industry is to be in right now? This is from Eric Taylor.
I mean, to be working at Slack or Zoom's got to be pretty good places to be working right now, right?
That's right. Microsoft Teams. I would work at Microsoft Teams. I'd work at, one of these other organizations.
Yeah. But I mean, It's an interesting one. I think that it's not so, all the companies that are doing really well now, that they've done really well at this situation, and they're probably not going to continue to do amazingly well post that situation because the demand's going to slump. But what really, I think, what is really going to be interesting, what people really need to be looking forward to, if they're looking at either industries to work in or if they're looking at more things to pivot into, is what's going to come out of this the other side. Like, there's a lot of companies that are dying at the moment, but there's a lot of companies that are created in recessions and times of difficulty, and that's what I'm looking forward to, and I'm kind of excited for. Is what are all these talented, intelligent people going to be putting their efforts to in this new time, and what are the new companies and exciting things that are to come out, and that's what I think people should be looking for, rather than trying to always chase the thing that's doing well at this moment in time.
That's right. And so, yeah, again, my Tarek put it in here. Cybersecurity is hot right now. I agree 100%, man.
Yeah.
I was talking to my friend who runs sales at a company called Electric.ai, and we were catching up like 4 weeks ago. And I'm like, and we were talking about this, and I was like, dude, the pivot has to be remote work security. Like, you are going to go do that. And then sure, like on LinkedIn, they're running ads and like doing well. Yeah. And so I think it's when you think about those types of things in particular, it's, what are we going to come on the outside of this? We're going to still continue to have a remote work, I think, for some time, right? Yeah. That's not going to go away. I probably wouldn't get into the co-working space right now. I think there's going to be a little bit of inventory on the market here, right?
I think so.
And so I think, Christopher Bancroft said designer face masks, but again, that's the now business, right? Like that's the make hay now. I think that's it, is just sit down and be smart. Let the stock market will kind of tell you, right? The stock market's always trying to look 3 to 6 months in advance. Now, granted, right now it's a little insane, but you can see, right? Like, people are riding a little Amazon, Netflix high, but you'll see that correct. You'll see these things happen as people, I think, right, there'll be a time when people stop doing Amazon because they're so happy to go out and they're going to go to their local place again.
Yeah, I mean, look, when you look at the last recession, I'm from an industry of kind of finance and fintech in general, so it's an industry that interests me. But when we came out of 2007, 2008, that's when we had this kind of surge of crowdfunding and peer-to-peer loan companies and these kind of fintech companies. And what's the key similarity? Well, it's basically these business models wouldn't have been able to kick off so well had there not been the premise of like a financial crisis where there's lack of trust in banks, and there was lack of access to funding. Right? So I would be thinking of that more from a perspective, what consumer behavior has now changed that can now unlock certain types of businesses to become like to kick off, for example. So I mean, just to give you one example, so I'm really into things like meditation and trying to look after mental health, and there's I've tried out a lot of these different types of apps, and there's different one-to-one coaching therapy apps that you can get on the phone, but these things have, like, the meditation ones have started to kick off, the therapy ones sort of slightly less. But it's a consumer behavior now where everyone's like, whoa, okay, remote, people in isolated, financial difficulty, mental health is like a serious thing. And people were starting to be like, okay, maybe I can access more of this sort of stuff through mobile applications. So they test these new things because of this forced situation that then creates this kind of like avalanche cycle. And that's just one example, but I would be thinking, okay, how is consumer behavior changed, and which companies that would have struggled before now have the perfect kind of storm environment for their ideology or whatever to be adopted in the mass. And that's where I'd be focusing on.
I love that. And I think for a lot of you in sales out there, think about this stuff, think about where you want to be, what gets you excited, and where you go. So we got a bunch of questions now coming in, which I love. All right. Getting deals across the line. All right. So Marco posted this a little bit ago. I missed it. It's, getting deals across the finish line. What can I give my champion to better arm them to sell internally in these times? So what are some things you think, for you, and I'm sure you've got reps in this situation, right? That they've got deals installed, et cetera. And I think that hopefully the advice that you're hearing now is don't create a one-size-fits-all approach that nobody's closing, because it's just not true.
It's not true. It's not true at all. It's really not true. Again, it's for risk of sound like a broken record. This is the same sort of tactics that you should be using before this, but it's even more important. The fact is, when you're trying to close something, you're going to get an objection of some sort, and that objection is often like a BS objection that masks the real reason behind why something's not closing. And in this environment, there's a lot of things that can be kind of defaulted to, okay, we're busy, we've got some like emergency COVID meetings and so on and so forth. And that there's a lot of truth that's going to be in there, but there's a lot of stuff which is just, it's just going to be relied on as something to kind of like shrug off salespeople.
Yeah.
If you're in that mentality of, okay, I'm fearful, salespeople are fearful right now, and that's a really dangerous place to be in. You have to be confident in your approach and confident you're doing the right things. And if you are confident, you can challenge things in a respectful way and understand, okay, it's not just about, when we're talking about challenging, okay, we're not talking about, I refer to this like Muay Thai boxing is like you're fighting someone. Aikido, you take the energy and you move around with it. And that's the same in sales. You don't just kind of try and fight an objection. You understand it, you bring it in, and then you work around it, and then you work it to the benefit of the prospect. So in these kind of objections, okay, well, what is the real objection? Are you worried because you don't want to get a tool where you're locked in for a year when you're worried about cash flow? Okay, so the objection is more something about how can we manage the pricing to ease that in for you or give you more security. So then it's like a pricing negotiation to just help you, ease into that. Or maybe it's a case of, there could be a whole number of different ones. So your goal there is to not just say, okay, they're not selling, I don't want to press, I don't want to do anything because I'm fearful. You have to first deeply understand and then be creative with the solutions to then get that over the line. So I would say you need to ask more questions, understand what does that mean? When you say we can't because of the virus, but okay, but specifically, what does that mean? Why do you not want to look at this? And help me understand that so I can create a solution to help you.
Yeah. But I think, Alfie, the interesting part, I think some people would hear that and feel like it's pushy, but it's not. It's, you're just saying like, look, the problems that you had before are the exact, like you still need X or Y or whatever. And so there's nothing wrong with at least asking the question. I think that's it, that there's nothing wrong that's hurting you as a seller from saying, hey, look, so when we talked before, these are the top priorities. I know that obviously a lot of things have adapted, but it seems like these are still the priorities and things that need to get solved. So just, again, like, let's just have an open conversation and invite that objection, too, and treat these a case by case instead of this one size fits all shit, like why?
You have to, yeah. To your point, I refer that to as weighting an objection. You have to put that in the context. It's like, okay, well, this is the problem that you proposed to me, and how much does that actually represent? What's the weight of that? What's the impact of that? And is it just kind of fallen under this blanket category of we can't move, we can't do anything, and we don't want to be too pushy, versus, okay, we can actually deal with that. That's not a really big objection. Or maybe it's just a case of, okay, the person who does need to actually sign off on this is in emergency meetings a week, but overall, this is a great time for us to sign this product. So really the objection is communication between internal stakeholders. So then you've got to be thinking, okay, well, how can I ease that process? And then let's put a placeholder in hold. Let's build a business case. Let me create some documentation. Let's ease that process, because that's the objection.
That's right.
It's not a no to your product or the no to the timing. There's something in the process that you need to ease out, like trying to ease out a knot in a muscle.
I think that's a great one. I mean, I think that's it. It's like, and there's only going to be, it's the same handful of objections, timing, whatever. Like, it's just being okay to ask at least one layer of questions. And I think if you're worried about being insensitive, right, just ask the one question. Before it was this, now it's this. What's the real, like, to your point, like, I understand, like, the virus has affected everybody, but what's specific to your organization and how it's affecting that, stopping this from happening. And that's it. I feel like if most salespeople could just do that. If most salespeople could just ask that one question, I think they'd see it's not quite like as doom and gloom, as they might seem. I was actually talking to a sales leader at PitchBook. And they did, Keenan has a system called gap selling. If you guys don't know Keenan, I'd follow him. We did a LinkedIn Live a couple weeks ago. And that's a big thing that he harps on, is this idea of like bringing it back to value of like, look, and that hasn't changed, just because there still is a value or something to be had, right? Potentially. So I've got a good one. This is from Adam Roberts. He says, how much should companies focus on existing relationships versus net new? So, the thing that we're really in a shitty place right now is because we've made the buyer journey so not even trifurcated. I don't know what 5 times cutting something is. Being quick to trade. I don't know what the hell it is. Right. But like that right now, I feel like we're feeling the effects of that you've got a customer success team that's really a customer service team. And all they know how to do is check in, touch base, or catch up, as opposed to like add value. You've got a sales team that kind of might know a little bit more like on how to engage people. But maybe how are you guys tackling it? How's your team, and whether it's your team or not, Alfie, how are you guys thinking about current customer relationships versus net new? And, what have the conversations been like internally?
Well, we're a SaaS business, so I think that, I'm a sales guy, so I love sales, but I'm very, very well aware that the most important part of the business is customer success. It's the retention of your client base and the natural expansion and growth of your customers. I mean, we literally just get a customer in the door, and if they stay for 1 month, that's not much money to the business. They've got to stay at least whatever your payback period is, 12 months, 18 months, whatever it may be, for them to even break even. So it is the most important part. So we do a lot of stuff at Spendesk to add value. We built a CFO Connect community, so we sell to CFOs and finance teams. We built a community that did do physical meetups. They now do virtual meetups in this environment. Private Slack channels, we'd have interviews, similar things like this. We'll interview finance leaders, record that, cut that up, and then be like, okay, there's someone that's a customer that I know was facing this issue, and I'm going to send them that value. So we either connect them with people that have answers to the questions that they're looking for, or we can try and provide them value either through our product that we know is going to help them, or other pieces of knowledge. And again, that's another point. I think people are so scared of that. They're like, I don't know how to add value. And you don't need to be the source of value. Okay. Yeah. You can just connect people with other experts in the industry. And it's really, really not hard to do. It's really not hard. Just have a call, record it, do a Zoom, cut it up, and be like, here's some of the 5 questions that most of our customers are asking. What's your take on that? And then send that over and connect them. And, there's lots of people, in our case, we've got European companies in the US and kind of like, multinational companies. And so they're trying to figure out all these, payment protection loans in different countries. And I had a conversation with one customer that was talking about the same thing. Would you like me to connect you to? And that's value add. And they're they will remember you for doing that stuff. And it costs absolutely nothing to do. It's just having that kind of like frame of thinking. If I was this customer, what would I need to be getting access to, and how can I be the broker of that value?
Yeah, that's right. You don't have to be the person with all the answers. The person who gets the credit is the person that shares it.
Absolutely.
And that's the same thing with producing content. So once someone chimed in here, and then there's another follow-up here. George put in something, about running sales for an AI company. But one of the questions we had was around, the current and future outlook for conversational intelligence, right? So it's obviously a lot in this space right now. And a lot of people, I think we're kind of definitely headed down this path, right? Of this idea that in the sales process and marketing process, conversational intelligence was going to take over more. And I don't know, I'm kind of putting you on the spot a little bit because, it's probably not something you've thought too much about. But what do you think is going to happen in that space? This whole idea of, I'm automating conversations, I'm, trying to, simplify or predict what people are going to do or say. What are your thoughts?
So I'm torn in 2 parts. I think that the kind of statement is, is a sales an art, or is it a process?
Sure.
And I think that the process is something, sorry, is it art or science, basically? And I think the process is science. I think it's very clear that the process is science to me, but execution is the art. And it's, what you need to do, but it's the way that you can execute it that will get it. For example, process being science. Okay, I know I need to get this key decision maker or key decision making unit on the call so that they're all bought in. That's process, that's science, that's clear, it's proven, statistically proven. If you have the right people that you're selling to, you're more likely you're going to close a deal. Execution, which is the art, is how do you do that? How do you have those conversations? Now, to be able to improve both process, which I think is change, it's not static, it changes over time, and how to improve and help train and coach on the art and the execution side, I think you need to be very data driven, and you need to have as much information as you can to guide where you need to be improving the process. So I'm a big fan of having as much data as possible, but I think that people can misuse data often. For example, the most typical way that happens is when people are tracking input activities like number of calls, number of emails, rather than focusing on the output. Focusing on the input is the wrong thing to do. I'd say the only time to do that is this month of April, where all your assumptions, like I was saying before, are no longer valid. So you need to focus on input to figure out what the new output is. But that's the only time. Otherwise, I don't think that's the truth. So these tools, you have to be careful with them, because they can tell the story that you want it to create rather than actually seeing what it's actually telling you.
Yeah, I love that. It's a good call out too, that, you know, data, it's funny. I didn't believe this for a long time. And then somebody, a friend of mine kind of shoved it in my face appropriately. You know, I was like, look, it's the data. And he's like, dude, I can make the data say whatever I want it to. Like, I can make the fact. And I was like, oh yeah, you kind of can do that, you know? And I think with these conversational intelligence tools, you know, for me, at least my take is that they're not ready for this amount of complexity. So it's, again, can you give conversational, you know, should you be thinking about these tools? Absolutely. Should you be, like, you know, experimenting and on ways to leverage them best? Absolutely. But do you also need to make sure that, you know, you're monitoring very, very closely the customer experience, et cetera? That's everything. That's everything.
Yeah, I think this is something that goes back to my days when I was working in more finance and, you know, around people that were doing algorithmic trading. Like, you don't just build this algorithm and just let it do its thing. You have to understand the cause and effect relationship. What is this correlation, or is this causation? Does X mean Y, or what's the actual other impacts that are affecting this? You know, and that's something that you've really got to think about. For example, you may have a conversation intelligence tool that says every time your competitor is brought up at this point, you lose the deal. But what does that tell you? Does that mean that your objection handling sucks, or does that mean that you should have actually brought up all the competitors at the beginning of the sales process to bring out all the objections early on, to deal with them and set the right plan? Well, the conversation intelligence tool is not going to tell you that. Your kind of own intelligence and the way you view the cause and effect impact relationship is going to do that. So I think that there's too many people focusing on trying to find the silver bullet, and sales is not ever a silver bullet. It's a combination of lead bullets at once.
I love that. I might borrow that. Yeah, I mean, what I always say is, like, I say that there's no silver bullet. All I can do is give you techniques and things that will give you a 5% higher likelihood, or a 7%, or a 10%. You know, in that, if you execute all of these percentages, then yes, you're going to have a higher likelihood to close, you know, in like that environment.
Exactly.
All right. So we've got some other ones coming in here. All right. We've got one here from Gallum. I sell payment solutions to universities. Do you suggest looking into macro and micro issues topics to specify outreach to prospects? Divide them into buckets of what they care about: finance director, international officer, etc. What else would you suggest as an approach to this? So payment solutions for universities, reaching out to a wide variety of people. How would you think about building an outbound plan for something like that? You know, and he's already talking about putting people in the buckets, which is right.
Yeah, so it sounds like you've kind of got your ICP, which is your ideal customer profile, which is more the company and the type of, you know, businesses you're going to reach out to and what stage they are. And then the question is more about who are the buyer personas and how do you build a messaging out for those. Yeah. So a tool that I use for this when we're starting out, and it's part of our ramp up with all of our SDRs, is to go onto LinkedIn Jobs, type in the buyer persona name of the person that you're thinking of selling to. So for example, we sell to financial controllers, CFO. So I'll type in financial controller, San Francisco. I find some companies that I know that are in my ICPs. I click on that, and then it tells you the key responsibilities of the roles. Right? And it's the easiest one. And it'll have like five things.
Yeah.
It's so easy. And then I create a table, or Excel, wherever you want to do it. You create a table, you say, what are all of the similar things in the key responsibilities that come up a lot? Okay. And then, so that's basically the goals that your buyer persona is trying to get to, regardless of your product, because it's never about your product. It's about what they're trying to get to. And then you write another column, which is all of the pains and things that are going to prevent them from getting there. That obviously is related to the industry that you're in. And then I'd write extensively every single thing in a lot of detail, and then understand, okay, what are the value propositions that you help with? So that when you're doing your messaging, it's more about the story arc of how can I help this, buyer persona get, to their golden journey, get to the top of the mountain, which is the key objective, and educate them on all of the challenges that are going to come up in between, i.e. all the pains, and how we can help them. But it's about that story rather than just trying to be describing your product and the ROI of the product, which no one cares about. It's how can you get them to their end goal? And that end goal is often found in their key responsibilities on the job post. And that's like a quick one, which I think is time and time again worked.
I think that's great. And like he has to follow up here about talking to current customers. Like absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
It's
100%.
Both. Yeah, it's both. It's not or. Yeah, you should be talking to your current customers about it too. You know, and that's why, you know, I think a lot of companies like I know that they'll have like the sales team has to go spend like a day on you know, Spendesk or, you know, whatever it is to like actually learn like what are the questions that these people have. Like that's more like at the user level, but I think that's right. You 100%.
And a top tip on that one, never go off of what it says in Salesforce that your salesperson said they bought the product of as your reason. Never use that because it's never necessarily the reason. Ring them up as a customer success and interview them and say, in your own words, what was the problem that you were trying to solve and why did you buy this product? Because it will very often not be the reason that the salesperson thought it was when they put it in Salesforce. And the terminology and the language that they use, I'm constantly doing it. Even now, even after 2.5 years in the company, I'm always writing down like a library of quotes and things that people say, the way they describe our product, the value. And that's the sort of stuff that you can then use in your messaging because you're talking the language of your buyer.
That's right. And that's it for me. You know, and I'll say one more, then I've got some more questions here and we'll take a couple more. You know, for me, I more and more I realized how lucky I was. I started my I worked in sports for a long time, but then not a long time, 2.5 years. And then I went and my first kind of tech job was in the job space. And our territories were by location, they were by region. And so I ran the Pacific Northwest team. And I had tech companies, cleaning companies, pest companies, drilling companies. And so we would just ask, what great. So like, tell me more, like, what are the top responsibilities of someone, you know, in this space? And then they would just tell you. And I feel like that's the other thing too, is that especially early on, like I was just a sponge. And now like I've talked to so many different people in different industries that I can like quickly like pick it up. But it's because I asked, I wasn't scared of looking stupid either.
Yeah.
And certainly some people, I think that's it. See, so we'll take a couple more questions here. So we got one from Phil. I'm going to go for this. Papa Nastasui. Nastuo. Papa Nastayu. I don't know. You can take a crack at it too, Alfie, if you want to. Let's just go with Phil. Phil's question. He said almost there. What are your thoughts on setting up local sales teams for selling from HQ? Ignoring practical details like time difference for now, please. More interested in timing versus revenue generation, potential growth, etc. So basically, and you've got a shit ton of experience in this, man. So I'm gonna let you tackle this one. You know, setting up local sales team versus everyone selling from HQ. Tell me, because you're in the thick of that, right? You're the head of US sales, right? And so you've done this for other companies too. So what has that meant for you?
Yeah, so we've done both different types of things, right? So when we first started the UK market, so Spendesk is a French company. So I moved to Paris, France, to go and start the UK market, and we were there for pretty much about 2 years before we actually put our team in London. We've only just started to open up an office there, and the same with all of our other European places. So we had our base team in headquarters. Now I think that there's pros and there's cons to doing both things. So for example, in the US, we've straight away flown out, created an office, started hiring here. We haven't done that remotely first, we've gone straight there. Now there's a few different reasons for that. You said ignore the time zone, but obviously that is a big player into that. Now what are the pros and the cons?
Did you have clients though, Alfie, just real quick? You have US clients so already?
Yeah, so the nature of our product is a lot of companies that we sell to are global. So we have a lot of people that are European, have European offices come to us and then have US operations. So yes, there's kind of like a little bit of that first circle that you can kind of base off of. But a lot of those are on the East Coast as opposed to West Coast. But the pros and the cons, well, I think the pros of having everyone in headquarters is culture. And it depends on the size of the company, where you are. Are you a fast scale-up? Are you a traditional company? What is your culture and so on? We're a company that we were growing. We were doubling in size in terms of employee headcount, probably around every 9 months. So we have 2 offsites a year just so people get to know their colleagues and create memories, right? And that's really important. So when you're growing that fast, it's very easy for this culture to kind of go off in its other ways. So having everyone in the headquarters through that kind of first creation of your countries is great, because you can have, and this is not just culture in kind of just, you know, wishy-washy terms. This is also about process, and how do you watch those sales culture, and how do you scale that up? You know, you want to get to a point where you've got repeatable processes in both the sales aspect and also the way that people deal with certain situations and values, to then have those as ambassadors to go out to the other places. So that's kind of one thing to take into consideration. Then, are you field sales or are you inside sales? If it's if it's field sales, I think you I mean, it's obvious. You've got to be in the place that you're selling to. You've got to have operations where you can get to those customers. For us, we were inside sales, so it didn't really matter that we were in headquarters and in a different country. The difference in Europe and Paris and London is 2 hours by train. Super easy. So I could just be in London the next day, or even the same day if I really needed to. If you don't have that luxury, you've got to think about, if I'm creating a market for the first time, technically speaking, no, you do not need to meet your customers to close deals or generate pipeline. However, there is another objective at the beginning of a market, which is you deeply need to understand your customers, how they're using your product, the objections, and you only get that really in person. You need physical interactions to hear people, to understand how they respond to certain things that are going on, how they use the product. So I would say you need to get there as quickly as possible and meet them as much in person. So there's no right or wrong answer. It depends really on what goals you are and where you are in the stage of your company. And is this, you know, a new market in a fast growing company, or your traditional company, and so on. So there's no one size fits all.
I agree. The thing I'll add from my own experience is, you know, I'll take my experience at Glassdoor, where I think I started to like basically grow field sales too quickly before we had the enterprise sales motion figured out. And to me, I'm a big fan of, even when you're going to do field, is spin the process where everyone's together, you're learning, et cetera, because they can always fly to a territory, right? And then it makes hiring a field offices, et cetera, so much easier because you have a formula. I think where a lot of companies struggle with the field is that they don't have the formula. They just hire people from the industry and expect them to figure it out, and they don't. And then they don't have the Rolodex or any of that shit. That's a whole other thing.
That's exactly it. Yeah. Another way to rephrase that in the way we look at it is, before you invest in scaling something out, you need to have a certain level of predictability. Whether you call that process, formula, whatever it may be. And the best way to do that is have everything kind of tight together until you know you can repeat it. And that's when you can kind of maybe risk the dilution of culture and so on by opening up other offices.
I think that's the move. All right. Yeah. But again, like you said, if it's more inside sales and you can make up for the time zone, like maybe you never need to do it. Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's no language or cultural barriers or things like that are very, very nuanced that you can't do in your home market. So, all right, last question here from Giovanni Gallo. Very patient. Giovanni, I appreciate you being patient and waiting. What are the pitfalls of message testing through sequence? You think a prospect is dealing with 2 to 3 different, outcomes, and you send each to see which sticks. Something over nothing. Just pick one. So, what are your thoughts on, again, like using sequencing tools, et cetera? And how do you think about using those tools in times like this in particular?
Yeah. So I think the concept behind A/B testing is extremely important. You need to be testing everything, and the more data you can have, the more data you can use to figure out what that actually is telling you. Unfortunately, there is very limited information you can actually get from these tools. You get the open rate, you get the reply rate and click-through rate, maybe the positive or negative reply rate, right? So the open rate, okay, well that's going to tell you how good your subject line is. The click-through rate is going to maybe tell you how good your call to action to something is in interesting, engaging it is in the email. And your reply rate is going to tell you, well, how good is your email written to get a reply? So I would look at these sort of things and say, okay, what is this telling me, and where does that then lead me to change my message? If I'm getting a really high open rate and a really high reply rate, but it's really negative, well, maybe my the education around the pain or the value proposition is just not clear. Maybe you've written a good enough email with a lot of personalization, the effort's there, but there's something business-wise not clicking there. Whereas if you had a high open rate and low response rate, well, maybe your just email just sucks in general and you need to completely review how you do that. But the difficult thing is you don't want to over rely on any one thing. You want to triangulate all of your information. So data around sequencing and A/B testing is one part of that. I would then be ringing people up again, like we said, ring your customers, understand these things, be testing these kind of like, strap lines, asking what are your main objectives at the moment, to figure out if the message you're actually using is going to stick or not, because it's very, very difficult to get that from an email. One thing that I would recommend doing is kind of in the same instance, be doing this, using the similar messaging that you've got in emails, but on cold calls, because you can get more instant feedback on a cold call to see what works. And cold calls are a very good educative process to then guide what you should be putting in your emails.
And I'm a big fan of calling right now. Like a lot of people, they've got their out of office on, like they're telling you what their cell phone number is. Like I agree. There's nothing like you hear in real time that response of like, and if you hear that enough versus, that's something that resonates, then you know that you've got a weak one. And so I think for me, I'm all about it, but I think what you're getting at, and this was like, I was in like, what was it? Like IB chemistry. I don't know, like in high school, which is a little known fact about me, but in order to do a successful experiment, you have to isolate variables. And if not, and to make, a true A/B test, you have to isolate the variable that you're trying to test for versus trying to test 7 things. So I'm a massive fan of doing A/B tests, but just make sure you're isolating the variables.
Absolutely.
What happens if I add these other things together? But well, Alfie, this is awesome, dude. I'm glad we got a chance to do this because I think we've actually got a lot of like really similar philosophies on these things, and I think it was a good conversation for sure, man. Is there anything that anything you want to leave people with? When you think about these times, anything that's top of mind for you?
I just think that we've got to take the fear away from the sales process and being a salesperson. People will never stop buying. People that have problems will always want to solve their problems. People just never want to be sold to. So let's stop trying to sell to people and let's just be the provider of value and help people solve their things. And let's just use this all together to step up and level up our sales game. And let's come out of this stronger and share information together and build a great community. So that's my kind of two cents on it.
I love that, man. And I think that's it. I think my hope is that this is going to sound kind of messed up. My hope is that we go through enough pain to remember how to do the thing correctly versus going back to what's easy. That we realize that this is the right path forward, that we shouldn't go back to what's easiest. That's my hot take on it. Well, look, brother, I appreciate it, man. We'll catch up with you here in the next few weeks. Hope you're doing well. Stay healthy. Stay
awesome.
Safe.
Peace out, everyone.